A daughter spends weeks planning her mother's birthday flowers, chosen with care, music curated for joy, every detail designed to honor the woman who raised her. But in the middle of the celebration, her father stands, points at her, and delivers a sentence that shatters everything. Pay $2,000 rent or get out, and never come back. The room falls silent. Guests stare. Her brother smirks. And in that instant, Natalie Pierce realizes she's not just the overlooked child. She's the family's scapegoat, the invisible provider, the one they've used and discarded for years. What would you do if the people who were supposed to protect you became the very ones who betrayed you? Would you stay, or would you walk out into the night, leaving behind the chains they forged for you? Tonight, you'll follow Natalie's journey from humiliation to heartbreak, from betrayal to a breathtaking rise that no one saw coming. You'll feel the sting of secrets uncovered, a stolen future, a forged loan, a trust buried deep, and the moment she transforms that pain into power. But before we dive in, take a second, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this aren't just entertainment, they're lessons, reminders that even in the darkest betrayal, strength can be born. Stay with us, from the first wound to the final triumph. Because what Natalie uncovers will not only shock you, it will change the way you see family, loyalty, and freedom forever. I never thought a birthday cake could taste like humiliation. The restaurant shimmered the way I'd planned it, soft lights, white tablecloths, lilies breathing a clean sweetness across polished silverware. I'd spent weeks on the phone with vendors, talking through menu tiers and chair counts, haggling over a DJ who understood that Motown makes people generous and that nobody wants an encore of Happy Birthday. I'd chosen the place for my mother Elaine the way a daughter chooses a dress she hopes will finally earn a compliment. 30 guests slid into their seats, glasses chimed, and the air had that buoyant hum you hear in rooms where people expect to be loved. My family barely noticed me. My father, Richard, was bragging at the center of the table, a hand anchored on my brother Ethan's shoulder like he was pinning a medal. He's leading the rollout. Dad told anyone with ears. They're lucky to have him. Ethan smiled with that brand of ease reserved for favorite sons. Around them, faces tipped in adoration. I stood at the entrance with the guest list and a practiced smile that felt more like a mask. "Table 3 is over there," I said to an aunt who didn't hug me, who looked beyond my shoulder and asked where Ethan was sitting. By the third time someone called me the planner, I just nodded. A man I'd known since childhood placed a palm on my arm and said, "Hey Katie, right? Could you check if my wife's gluten-free?" I laughed, softly polite. Invisible, "It's Natalie," I said, and pointed him toward the server I'd already prepped. We opened presents. From Ethan, Mom sang, clutching a glossy bag, her voice girlish with delight. A designer scarf spilled out, and the table swooned. "You shouldn't have," she trilled. My card, a simple note pressed with a lily, sat unopened under tissue paper. I found my seat at the far end by the exit, a strategic choice made for me, I suspected, so I could slip out to fix problems without disrupting real conversations. The DJ lowered the volume for toasts. I could feel the moment tilting even before it happened, the way storm clouds gather over a blue afternoon. Dad pushed back from his chair, face flushed the color of the Merlot he'd been pouring like victory. He clinked a knife against his glass and cleared his throat. The restaurant fell obediently silent. "Natalie," he said, pointing like he was calling on a disobedient student. Heads turned. Forks hovered midair. My name felt like a summons. "You live under our roof," he boomed, voice cutting clean through the room. "Starting next month, you pay $2,000 in rent or you get out and don't come back." The words slapped. Somewhere behind me, a spoon clinked the bottom of a bowl and then stopped. Even the candles seemed to flicker backward. I stared at him, at the finger still aimed in my direction like a verdict. A thin, hot breath stretched across the table. Ethan leaned back, all leisurely elbows, a smirk tilting one corner of his mouth. "Good luck with that, little sis," he said, loud enough to travel, quiet enough to deny. A ripple of awkward laughter moved through the guests like a shrug they couldn't stop. My throat went dry. I felt the old reflex to explain, to apologize, to volunteer for a deadline I didn't owe. but something hard and diamond-sharp lodged inside my chest. The inventory of what I had done organizing bills, buying groceries, calling insurance, wrangling schedules stacked up like receipts in a ledger no one would read. I set my napkin down. The linen left a faint indent on my palm. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost detached, like a narrator floating above the scene. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She toyed with the silk scarf on her lap, looping it once, twice, as if a knot might save her from choosing a side. I stood. No one told me to stay. No hand reached. No chair scraped in defense. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" The server, poor kid, almost bumped into me with a tray of champagne flutes and mumbled, "Sorry, didn't see you." Of course you didn't, I thought. That's been the theme. I crossed the room in measured steps, heels tapping out a metronome line that finally belonged to me. The lily arrangement at the host's stand threw a clean, cool scent as I passed. My eyes snagged on the rim of a candle where wax had overflowed and hardened into a tidy lip. It looked like resilience poured by accident. At the door, the manager gave me a sympathetic smile, the kind you reserve for people who might cry in bathrooms. I didn't. The night air outside hit my face crisp and honest, tasting faintly of rain and distant fryer oil. The lot glittered with taillights. My car waited across the strip of painted lines, exactly where I'd left it, nose out, ready. I walked straight to it, fishing for my keys without looking down. My hand knew the habit. When you've learned to anticipate storms, you start parking your exits. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool through my dress, and closed the door on the muted roar of a restaurant returning to its program. The engine turned over in a soft, steady hum. For a second, I watched the reflection of the party in the rearview, tiny, distant figures raising glasses to a speech that had nothing to do with me. Maybe Dad was laughing now. Maybe Ethan was reenacting my walkout for sport. Maybe Mom was arranging the scarf again, feigning concentration so no one asked her to pick a daughter. I put the car in drive. It wasn't just about the rent. It had never been. The demand was a message disguised as math. Pay for the privilege of being diminished. I had spent years auditioning for a role I already owned daughter and got cast as support staff anyway. There's a point where you stop negotiating your worth and start collecting what's left of your pride. The headlights washed the asphalt in clean, white certainty. As I pulled out, a numbness gave way to something steadier resolve settling into my bones like a second spine. They didn't know it, but I had planned for exits the way I planned for parties, down to the last detail. I'd put deposits where they mattered. I'd kept certain keys where no one else could find them. I turned left, away from the restaurant's glow, watching its sign shrink in my mirror until it was just another bit of neon bleeding into the night. My phone buzzed once on the console, someone from the party maybe, or a bank alert I hadn't yet learned to fear. I let it buzz. The city slid around me, stoplights, storefronts, a couple laughing under the halo of a street lamp. The world kept going. So did I. By the time I hit the highway ramp, I wasn't thinking about applause I never got or the card that remained unopened under tissue paper. I was thinking about doors and locks, and what it means to own both. I was thinking about how silence, the kind you choose, can feel like oxygen. I pressed the accelerator. The road unspooled like a promise. And for the first time in years, I didn't look back. The silence of the highway was louder than the birthday party ever had been. Streetlights slid across my windshield in yellow intervals, like someone was ticking off all the years I had wasted trying to belong. By the time I reached the edge of town, the tightness in my chest had thinned into something sharper: determination. I wasn't going back to that house. Not tonight. Not ever. Because what they didn't know, the ace I had been hiding beneath the tired smile and the polite nods, was that I already had a home of my own. A small 2-bedroom brick place on the south side with a narrow porch and a stubborn oak tree that dropped leaves like confetti. I had signed the papers months ago, alone at a title office, while the clerk congratulated me as if I were getting married. In a way, I was married to freedom. I had moved things piece by piece, the way you move contraband, making sure Richard and Elaine never noticed the gaps in my closet or the boxes missing from the basement. Tonight, when I steered the car down the quiet street and pulled into the driveway, it felt like arriving at a sanctuary I had been building in secret. The porch light flicked on with the timer I'd installed, welcoming me like a silent ally. Inside, the house still smelled of paint and cardboard. Stacks of boxes leaned against the walls, my books, my framed degrees, the thrift store lamps I loved more than any gift I'd ever been given by family. I dropped my purse on the counter, slipped off my heels, and sat on the floor. The hardwood was cool beneath me, but it felt steady. It was mine. Every inch. Yet relief came braided with ache. I leaned my head back against the wall and memories started unspooling like old film reels. 16. Ethan's birthday. I'd stood on the porch with a camera in my hand, watching as Dad unveiled a brand new car. Silver, polished, bow on the hood. The crowd cheered. Mom clapped so hard her palms turned pink. Ethan shouted, "Best day ever!" I remember thinking maybe my turn would come. When I turned 16, I got a $10 bill slipped across the table like pocket change. "Don't spend it all in one place," Dad had said, already reaching for the sports section. No car, no bow, just silence swallowing the sound of my gratitude that never mattered. At soccer games, they shouted themselves hoarse for Ethan, shaking foam fingers and bragging about his goals. I had trophies to debate, math competitions, straight A's, but they stayed in boxes, dust collecting on proof that I had been worth more than background noise. I'd glance at the bleachers, searching for faces that never showed. Even the little things carried weight. People at family gatherings would ask, "Who's Natalie?" And my mother would laugh like it was a joke. "Oh, she's around somewhere," as if my existence was an afterthought, a shadow behind the golden sun. And yet I still tried. I chipped in on bills, covered groceries, paid the phone plan when Dad forgot. Part of me believed that if I carried enough weight, someone would finally say, "Thank you, we see you." But all I got were more expectations. My contributions became invisible scaffolding, holding up a house that pretended I didn't exist. The party had been my last gamble. I poured savings into lilies and playlists, desperate for them to notice the daughter who had built the stage. Instead, Dad used the moment to tear me down in front of 30 witnesses. I stared at the ceiling of my new house, the silence humming like a heartbeat. No cheers for Ethan, no scolding for me. Just peace, thin, fragile, but mine. On the coffee table sat the final box I'd carried from their house earlier that week. Inside were books I loved, spines cracked from nights I'd stayed up reading with a flashlight. On top, folded neatly, was the old sweater Grandma had given me before she passed. She was the only one who had ever called me bright girl, with a certainty that made me believe it. I pressed the fabric to my face, breathing in the faint lavender that still clung to it, and I felt steadier. 2 days had passed since the party. I'd settled in, setting up Wi-Fi, unpacking dishes, making grocery runs. But the sting of Richard's voice and Ethan's smirk clung like smoke. Every time I brewed coffee, every time I unpacked another box, I heard the echo, "Pay $2,000 or get out." I had gotten out, and yet, it still felt like chains rattling. That evening, as I sat with my laptop on my knees, a notification lit up my phone. A withdrawal alert from the joint account I'd shared with my parents. $500. Then, $300. Miscellaneous. My stomach dropped. I hadn't touched that account in weeks. I logged in. More charges. Gas stations across town. Coffee shops I'd never been to. 100 here. 200 there. Stacked over months like termites eating through beams. My pulse quickened as I traced the trail. Dad had access. Ethan too. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. I wasn't just invisible. I was a resource. A safety net they had been milking dry while smiling through birthday toasts. The screen glared back at me. Betrayal, disguised as transactions. I closed the laptop slowly, my hands trembling but my resolve sharpening. If they thought I'd keep playing the role of invisible provider, they were about to learn who Natalie Pierce really was. This wasn't just about walking away anymore. It was about fighting back. The alert from my bank didn't stop gnawing at me. Even after I closed the laptop, The numbers danced behind my eyelids. I barely slept that night, tossing on the couch surrounded by half-opened boxes. Every creak in the house felt like a reminder that something was wrong, that I wasn't safe not from strangers but from my own blood. By morning, I brewed coffee with shaking hands and sat back down in front of the screen. If I was going to be haunted, I might as well have proof. I scrolled line by line through months of shared account history. Some charges were small, almost easy to dismiss: $40 at a coffee chain, $150 at a bar across town. But then I saw it. A loan application. 6 months ago. Approved. $50,000. My name listed as the primary borrower. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My finger hovered over the trackpad, dread flooding my body like ice water. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even known about it. Yet here it was. My social security number, my address, all tied to a debt I never agreed to. I called the bank. My voice trembled at first, but steadied as the representative confirmed what I feared. Payments were overdue. My credit was on the line. "You're listed as the applicant," she said flatly, as if reading from a script. "No," I whispered. "I'm not." There was only one way that information could have landed on that form. Dad had access to my records, my social, my old files in the cabinet he locked in the study. He'd brushed off late-night calls about tight finances, saying he was handling things. Now I knew what that meant. I hung up, hands cold, a ringing in my ears like church bells after a funeral. Betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It had a dollar sign. It had paperwork. It had stolen my future without asking. But I wasn't going to let them, not anymore. One by one, I started cutting ties. I logged into every shared account, electricity, insurance, internet, and removed my name. Each confirmation felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When I called to cancel the internet service, the agent hesitated. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This will disconnect the whole household." I-9. "Yes," I said firmly. "Do it." An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Ethan, Wi-Fi's down, fix it. Now." No, please, no context. Just the same entitled command I'd lived under for years. I stared at the message, thumb hovering. The old Natalie would have jumped to solve it, desperate to avoid conflict. But that girl was gone. I typed 3 words, "Not my problem," and hit send. My pulse raced as if I'd just shouted in a crowded room. For once, silence followed. Ethan didn't reply. And I didn't care. I dove back into the statements, anger propelling me. More charges surfaced: $200 at a tech store, $400 for a car service, $150 at a rooftop bar. Every transaction lined up with Ethan's flashy lifestyle, the gadgets he bragged about on social media, the trips he posted about with captions like, "Living large." He wasn't just careless. He was reckless, and he was using me as his bankroll. I screenshotted everything, saving them into a folder I labeled evidence. Each image was another nail in the coffin of their lies. My jaw ached from clenching, but it felt good, powerful. For years I'd been their invisible safety net. Tonight, I was pulling the net away. Finally, I called the bank again. "Freeze the account," I said. The representative explained the disputes it could trigger, the mess it might cause. "Let them dispute it," I cut in. "It's mine too, and I'm done being their scapegoat." By the time I hung up, the account was locked. Untouchable. No more siphoning. No more using my name like a credit card. It felt like slamming a heavy door. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling of my little house. The weight in my chest hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. I wasn't just bleeding anymore. I was stitching the wound closed. And as the sun dipped beyond the blinds, painting the room in orange and shadow, I whispered the words that tasted like steel on my tongue. "This ends now." The glow from my laptop bathed the living room in blue as I typed. My fingers moved with a precision I didn't know I had, each keystroke a blade carving distance between me and the people who'd treated me like property. Subject line: unauthorized charges and fraudulent loan. I listed everything. The forged $50,000 loan. The tech store splurges. The Paris plane tickets Ethan had bragged about online. I attached screenshots, dates, amounts, receipts. My email was sharp but controlled, professional enough that a lawyer could present it in court if it came to that. Dad, Mom, Ethan. This stops now. If I see one more charge tied to my name, I will pursue legal action. Fraud, forgery, theft. It's all here. Do not test me. I hit send. My pulse thudded in my ears. But it wasn't fear. It was clarity. An hour later, my phone buzzed, not with a reply. With humiliation, packaged for public consumption. Ethan's post. Some people are so selfish. Abandoning family over a few bucks. Guess who thinks they're too good for us now? The photo beneath was a smirking selfie, champagne glass in hand. Comments piled up like flies. Ungrateful brat. Who walks out on their parents? Bet she'll come crawling back. My stomach twisted, but I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted everything his words. The chorus of insults, the timestamps. Each cruel comment was another stone in the wall I was building against them. If Ethan wanted to drag me through the mud, I would turn his mud into evidence. I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it Case File. Inside went the screenshots, the bank statements, my warning email, and now Ethan's digital smear campaign. The file was growing, thickening into armor. For years, I had been the quiet one, the fixer, the errand girl, the invisible backbone. They mistook my silence for weakness. But silence can be a strategy. Silence can be the pause before the strike. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I trusted. My friend Marissa, an attorney who'd once joked that my family treated me like a free paralegal. When she answered, I laid it out. Forgery, unauthorized charges, a loan I never signed. And now this smear campaign, I said, my voice steady. She didn't even hesitate. That's enough for a case. We start with a cease and desist. If they keep pushing, we escalate to fraud charges. The words settled in my chest like anchors of reassurance. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. That night, I drafted the letter under Marissa's guidance. Cease and desist from further unauthorized use of my financial information. Cease from defamatory statements. Every sentence was a brick in the fortress I was building, each legal term a promise that I would not be erased. By midnight, exhaustion should have knocked me flat. Instead, adrenaline thrummed through me. I walked barefoot across my little living room, staring at the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. For once, they didn't look like chaos. They looked like choices waiting to be made, a life being rebuilt on my terms. My phone stayed silent. No replies from Richard, Elaine, or Ethan. Typical. Silence had always been their weapon, ignoring me, minimizing me, erasing me. But this time, their silence was proof of guilt. Proof that they had nothing left to say. I slid my phone face down on the counter. The light from the street lamp stretched across the window pane, cutting the room in two. One side belonged to the life they'd scripted for me, obedient, voiceless, invisible. The other side was mine now, raw, dangerous, uncharted. And standing in the middle, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until then. They weren't going to win. Not this time. 2 days passed. My inbox stayed empty. No reply from Dad, no acknowledgement from Mom, no apology from Ethan. Their silence pressed against me like a wall, but I refused to break. Instead, I sharpened my evidence, double-checking dates, screenshots, transactions. If they wanted a war of silence, I'd counter with proof. On the third evening, just as I was sifting through receipts, a knock rattled my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My chest tightened. Through the peephole, I saw a familiar face. My mother's older sister, Nancy. Nancy was the kind of woman who never showed up without reason. She stood on the porch, her shoulders squared, a thick envelope tucked under one arm. When I opened the door, her eyes softened, but her jaw stayed firm. "Natalie," she said quietly, stepping inside. "We need to talk." The words made my stomach twist. For years, Nancy had been the only one in the family who really saw me. She didn't coddle, didn't dismiss. Tonight, She looked like someone carrying a burden too heavy to keep secret any longer. We sat at the kitchen table. She slid the envelope toward me. "You deserve to know the truth," she said. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the first paper. A letterhead from a Raleigh tech company. Addressed to me. A job offer. Senior analyst. Full benefits. Salary higher than anything I'd ever dreamed. My throat closed. I had never seen this. Nancy's voice was low, urgent. They intercepted it, Richard and Ethan. The offer came last year, but your father responded on your behalf. Said you weren't interested. Nama. I flipped through the papers, bile rising. There were emails Dad corresponding with the recruiter, Ethan chiming in. Keep her here. She's not ready for that kind of responsibility. It felt like being gutted. I had spent months wondering why my applications went nowhere, why doors stayed shut despite my qualifications. Now I knew. The people who should have celebrated my wings had clipped them behind my back. Tears blurred the ink. Why? I whispered. Nancy's hands clasped together. Control. You were their safety net, Natalie. If you left, they'd lose the person who kept the lights on, paid the bills, carried the burden they never acknowledged. They needed you small. I shook my head, staring at the job offer, imagining the life I might have built in Raleigh, an apartment of my own, colleagues who saw my worth, mornings that didn't begin with someone else's demands. Rage curled hot in my stomach, grief tangled right beside it. Nancy reached into her bag again, pulling out another document. And this, she said softly, comes from your grandmother. I unfolded the paper. It was a copy of a will. Grandma had set aside a trust in my name. Not a fortune, but enough $15,000, held safely until I was ready. She wanted you to have a way out, Nancy continued. She saw how Richard and Elaine treated you. She worried Ethan's shadow would smother you. So she left you this. Lay. My chest tightened as I traced the words written in Grandma's looping hand. I could almost hear her voice. Bright girl. Don't let them decide who you are. Richard had never mentioned this. Not once. He'd hidden it, kept me in the dark while I scraped pennies to cover bills that weren't mine. I pressed the will against the table, my tears hot and unrelenting. They stole my future, I said, voice breaking. Nancy's eyes locked on mine, fierce and steady. And now you take it back. She slid a business card across the table. A lawyer's name printed in bold. Harper and Associates. Your grandmother's attorney has been waiting for your call. She'll help you claim what's yours and hold them accountable. The envelope lay open between us, its contents heavy with betrayal and unexpected hope. Job offers buried. Money hidden. Futures stolen. But also proof. For the first time, I had more than bruises of memory. I had weapons. I inhaled shakily, feeling something shift inside me. Pain, yes. Fury. Absolutely. But also a spark of strength my family had spent years trying to extinguish. I wasn't just going to fight for my money. I was going to fight for myself, for the woman Grandma believed I could be. Nancy reached across the table, covering my hand. You're stronger than they think, Natalie. Don't let them take that from you. Her words landed like a vow. That night, after she left, I sat at the same table, surrounded by papers, the forged loan, the stolen job offer, the will that proved I wasn't crazy. I dialed the number on the card. When Miss Harper answered, her voice was calm, professional, warm. I explained everything. The loan forged in my name, Ethan's reckless charges, Dad's lies, the intercepted job offer, the hidden trust. She listened carefully, then said, You have a case. Send me everything you've got. For the first time in weeks, hope surged through me like oxygen. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was a threat. A week later, I stood on the porch of the house I once called home, folder heavy in my hands. My heart raced, but my steps were steady. This was no visit. This was confrontation. Inside, the familiar scent of lavender candles mixed with the metallic tang of dread. Richard sat on the couch with a newspaper, acting casual. Elaine stirred something at the stove. Avoiding my eyes. Ethan sprawled in the armchair, scrolling on his phone, his smirk already forming as if he were rehearsing. I didn't sit. I placed the bulging folder on the coffee table with a thud that made Ethan glance up. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but sharp. I spread the papers across the table, bank statements showing the $50,000 loan forged in my name, screenshots of Ethan's spending sprees, his smug social media posts, the intercepted job offer, Grandma's will. The evidence lay bare like a crime scene. "You hid my future," I said, pointing to the job offer. "You used my name, my credit, my trust. You stole from me." Richard's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. Elaine froze, wooden spoon midair, her eyes darting between the papers and the floor. Ethan leaned back with a laugh. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he sneered. I met his gaze without flinching. "No. This ends now. I've documented everything. If any of you touch my accounts, harass me, or try to use my name again, I will take this to court. Fraud, forgery, theft. It's all here." Mom gasped softly, covering her mouth. Richard's face flushed red, his silence louder than denial. Ethan's smirk faltered. But he recovered, rolling his eyes. "You think you can cut us off? Good luck surviving without us." I picked up the folder, sliding the papers neatly back inside. "I already am," I said. My voice didn't shake. Then I turned and walked out. No one followed. Their silence was their confession. Back in my house, I called Miss Harper. I confronted them. I told her. She listened, then said, "Come in tomorrow. There's something you need to see." The next morning, I sat across from her in her book-lined office. She handed me an envelope sealed in my grandmother's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter. "Natalie, I know how they've treated you. I've seen your strength. Don't let them define you. Be fierce. Be free." Tears blurred the words, but I smiled through them. Along with the letter was confirmation of the trust. $15,000, untouched, protected, mine. That money wasn't just survival. It was seed. It was faith handed down from the only person who had truly believed in me. Within weeks, I used it to lease a small office downtown. White walls, secondhand desks, a whiteboard already scribbled with plans. I named it Rise Free, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women escape financial abuse inside their own families. The first client who walked through my door was a single mother whose paycheck vanished into her brother's gambling debts. I listened, offered resources, connected her with legal aid. Her story echoed mine, and for the first time, my scars became tools. Every day since has been full counseling sessions, budgeting workshops, late-night grant applications. Hard work, yes. But it was mine. My phone no longer lit up with demands from Richard or Ethan. Their numbers were blocked. Their chaos couldn't reach me. I heard whispers through mutual friends. My parents had lost their house. The $50,000 loan dragging them under until the bank foreclosed. They'd moved into a cramped rental across town. Ethan's flashy lifestyle collapsed under investigation. His credit wrecked, his social media gone quiet. I felt no triumph. Only relief. Their consequences were their own. One evening, I stayed late at the office. Thank you notes from clients dotted the walls, their words a chorus of survival. I traced one with my fingertip. "You saved me when no one else did." I thought of Grandma, of her letter, of the strength she saw in me when my own parents refused. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a safety net or a scapegoat. I was free, fierce, exactly as she had told me to be. Outside, the city lights glowed like promises. I locked up, stepping into the night air, my steps light, my heart steady. Natalie Pierce had been erased for years, but now, she was writing her own story. And it was only the beginning.